the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. Those meetings were called off. Let's get more on the situation in the Middle East. Amnon Aran is a professor of international politics of the Middle East at City University of London. Thank you very much for joining us here on LBC News this evening. A complicated picture in the Middle East. It always is complicated, isn't it? And as I say, lots of questions about that explosion at a hospital in Gaza. How key is that event going to be in the coming days and weeks, do you think?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I think the event will be key if, as the US president has indicated in his remarks today in Israel, this was a rocket of Palestinian Islamic Jihad that caused the explosion at the hospital. That will verify the Israeli claims, and effectively Israel will be able to continue with its military offensive more easily than it would have done if the evidence points towards its direction. So I think it will have quite an important role in determining the scale of the military offensive that Israel can deploy in the next few days.
There's been quite a difference, hasn't there, today in the way that the UK and the US have approached what happened in Gaza last night. Rishi Sunak insisting today we mustn't rush to judgment, we need to know the full facts. President Biden seeming to go in a bit foot first.
Yes, I think that is to be expected, though, given that President Biden knew that he would have to address this issue publicly, possibly in front of the whole world, since he was in Israel and he knew he would be asked about it. So it could be expected that the Americans would be keen to release and inform the president of evidence. Speed in their case was the essence, whereas in the case of the British intelligence and Rishi Sunak, there is a bit more time to look into the evidence. And I think that's really the explanation for why the two sides approached it somewhat differently.
There is this perception in Muslim countries, isn't there, quite often, that America sides very strongly with Israel. We did hear from President Biden this afternoon saying that Palestinians have also suffered greatly in recent days. So President Biden trying to, be a little bit even-handed with his comments later today after what he'd said this morning. But there is that concern, isn't there, that sometimes the United States can come too far on one side, on the side of Israel?
I think actually what you've just said really reflects the two key aims that President Biden was trying to achieve in his visit. So he did reaffirm his unequivocal support to Israel, political, military, economic, which is really designed primarily to deter the terrorist group Hezbollah and from entering the war and effectively transforming the Israel-Hamas war into a regional conflict. And that's why President Biden has reaffirmed again his support to Israel. It's a key overriding American interest, preventing the Israel-Hamas war from turning into a regional war. But at the same time, President Biden did make it clear, again in his remarks, that when talking about life-saving capacity to help innocent Palestinians who are caught in the war. And therefore, he emphasized also that Israel and the United States, as democracies, are committed to values that ensure that. And I think the Americans are actually very serious. And I think behind closed door, President Biden reiterated this to the Israeli War Cabinet, that he expects Israel to conduct a war, but it cannot completely disregard Palestinian humanitarian needs. And in fact, I think this is the background for why the Israeli cabinet has now approved or allowed or is about to allow some humanitarian aid to enter through the southern part of the Gaza Strip.
We're still awaiting, aren't we, for this ground invasion that we understand Israel is going to mount in Gaza. That potentially has the potential to change the dynamics further, doesn't it? Because it's going to be quite a different situation in the Middle East once Israel has gone in on the ground.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I think if and when the ground invasion will commence, that will really instigate, if you like, the second phase or the next phase of the Israel-Hamas war. It is clear that Hamas has prepared for an Israeli invasion into the Gaza Strip. We still know that there are some 400,000 civilians in the north of the Gaza Strip, although the Israelis and the Americans are trying to arrange for another humanitarian, if you like, safe zone, but this has not yet been secured in any way, shape, or form. So the combination of Hamas preparedness, dense civilian population, a very vast amount of civilians, and the Israeli offensive commencing certainly will take this war to another level, and I suspect a level that we have not seen yet.
We've been speaking about the various different sides in this and the difficulty about actually getting detail about what's actually happening on the ground. This does, I guess, prove that this is effectively a war that's going on, doesn't it? That quite often in a war it's difficult to actually get detail on what's actually happening.
Yes, it is undoubtedly a war. The numbers, first of all, speak for themselves. Hamas launched a murderous attack on Saturday the 7th, massacring Israelis for a number of hours. I think the current number is possibly more than 1,300 Israelis who were killed or murdered in those attacks. And of course, on the Palestinian side, I think the numbers are now close to 3,000 Palestinians who were killed in the course of the Israeli attacks. And of course, the fog of war, if you like, the uncertainty that exists on the ground really leaves beyond any doubt that we are in a war between Israel on the one hand and an organization, Hamas, which has been designated by several governments, including the United Kingdom, as a terrorist organization.
Amnon Aron, Professor of International Politics of the Middle East at City, University of London. Thank you very much for joining us.